Nicholas Berdyaev, The Collapse of Civilization and the Building Up of a New Knighthood. Nicholas Berdyaev writes these prophetic words in 1933. Contemporary history is being wound up. An unknown era is upon us, and it must be given a name. The old measures of history are no longer serviceable. As we realized with the sudden shock when the World War broke out, the more perceptive minds saw at once that the peaceable bourgeois pre-war way of life would become impossible. The rhythm of history is changing. It is becoming catastrophic. Nicholas Berdyaev was a Russian existentialist philosopher who lived from 1874 until 1948. Like his fellow existentialists of the early 20th century like Camus and Sartre and Kafka, he lived through the nightmarish cataclysm of World War I, and he witnessed the Russian Revolution and the rise of Bolshevism in Soviet Russia, and then experienced the annihilating events of World War II as fascism and communism collided on the world stage. By the time of his passing in 1948, he had witnessed it all, but he took notes. He was a prolific writer with over 20 published books between 1901 and 1947. His most notable works are Slavery and Freedom, Freedom and the Spirit, a work on Dostoevsky, and The End of Our Time. Now, it is this final work that we will be exploring today in this video. The End of Our Time was published in 1933, a disturbing time in history as Stalin and the atheistic Soviets were deep into their purging of the Russian countryside and the peasant class. And then Hitler was consolidating his power within Nazi Germany, and his butchering was just beginning. And the world was encompassed by a deep economic depression. All the while, in the shadows, another world war approached. This new age would bring with it an age of unparalleled technological development that would bring into question the very idea of what it means to be a Homo sapien. Now, Berdyaev sensed this approach of a new technological age. An ominous feeling of catastrophe haunted him. Berdyaev was a Christian existentialist, having been deeply impacted by the writings of Fyodor Dostoevsky, the Russian novelist and existentialist pioneer and master. At the core of Berdyaev's system was the idea of the image of God within humanity. He believed that modern humanity's crisis of identity began during the Renaissance, where the freedom of creativity was released upon the Western world as it rose out of the Dark Ages. Led by such greats as Leonardo da Vinci, humanity and its natural side were given the freedom to roam and explore and create. But in doing so, humanity was cut off from its organic center. Humanity began to grow and thrive in the physical two-dimensional world only, quickly cutting itself off from the other dimensions of existence. Having been cut off, humanity was now isolated within this two-dimensional world. Berdyaev writes this: "Humanism may have liberated human energies, but it cannot be said that it lifted up man spiritually. It emptied him." End quote. Berdyaev believed that the Renaissance, and in particular Leonardo da Vinci, were responsible. He writes this about da Vinci: "He was responsible for the mechanization and the materialization of modern life, for its deadness, and for the loss we have suffered of its highest meaning." For Berdyaev, the source of humanity's creative force is the Spirit of God. This source is not within the organic, physical nature of humanity itself, which is the message of pantheism and of secular humanism. Rather, the creative source is a spiritual source, one that is not quantified and material-based. It is not discernible through scientific study. It is a mystery, and within that mystery, the embracing of that mystery, that its strength lies. Humanity and its relationship to its creator, and the creative force beneath that creation is steeped in mystery and awe and creative power. This is the image of God within Homo sapiens, and it is within this mystery that our true, unique creative power lies. The Renaissance unleashed these creative powers within the culture of Western civilization, and humanity misinterpreted the source as being within itself and not the mysteries of God in the existence of higher dimensions. Hence, for Berdyaev, this was the moment that our civilization began its period of decadence as it slid into atheism. For Berdyaev, atheism is the attempt to alter humanity's image of himself or herself. For Berdyaev, all of man's troubles begin and end with atheism and humanity's denial of the image of God within their being. When humanity only looks towards itself as the source of its powers, the energy to create eventually dissipates and ceases. Humanity cuts itself off from its spiritual source, and in doing so, bad things will happen. Berdyaev writes this: "The natural man's confidence in himself leads to a fall, because he has denied the sources of his life. Cut off from his spiritual nature, he becomes a prey to illusions, and his life is made up of phantasms. Only the spiritual man, striking his roots deep in infinite and eternal life, can be true creator." End quote. He continues with this quote: "It is a general law that human individuality is strong, fruitful, and consistent so long as it recognizes super-individual and superhuman realities and values and submits itself to them. The moment that it denies these things, it becomes a cripple, withered, good for nothing." End quote. For Berdyaev, God is the source of our creative energies, and we are an enormous part of God's creation. God is in need of our help in realizing the true potential of creation's organic and spiritual nature. As he saw the cataclysms begin to cascade through the first half of the 20th century, Berdyaev saw the cycles of history begin to unfold. He felt that we were entering what he called a new Middle Age. He writes this: "An historical day can never give place to night without huge upheavals and ghastly calamities. It does not fade away peacefully." End quote. These times we are witnessing in 2020 are terrible and frightening. Yet Berdyaev believed that they were cyclical and a natural part of a renewal of humanity's attempt to allow God to live and create through us. He believed that World War I was a sign that industrial capitalism was dying. He writes this: "The end of capitalism is the end of modern history and the beginning of the new Middle Ages. The imposing humanist enterprise has failed, and the remains ought to be scrapped. But first of all, perhaps technical civilization will try the experiment of developing itself to its uttermost limits till it becomes a diabolical sorcery, just as communism has done." End quote. Berdyaev, being the true Christian existentialist that he was, remained ever hopeful in the future of humanity. But being a prophetic spirit of his age, he was realistic about the cyclical nature of history. He truly believed that we were headed for very dark times indeed, yet he knew and understood that a new age was being prepared. With this belief, he went to the next life, knowing that that too was just a part of the cycle contained within the nature of God. He ends with these words: "The night is coming, and we must take up spiritual weapons for the fight against evil. We must make more sensitive our power for its discernment. We must build up a new knighthood."